Now we've been sent these absolutely atrocious shocks to make some coilovers out of, and these are off Brad Holmes' MR2 that he's putting a Saab turbo engine into. So we thought it'd be a good idea to show you a full start to finish on how we build these shocks from scratch. So there are some things that we need to reuse off the original shocks. So first and foremost, we need to strip these completely down. Now these are the original shocks off the car and probably around 30 to 40 years old, so look at the state of that oil. And we have to strip the front ones down as well because there are things we have to reuse off front and the back. Now there are a few things that we reuse, and one of those are being the adapter that actually holds in the drop link and or the front trap rod end. Now we do also reuse the bracket that actually attaches the shock to the hub itself. Now in most cases these are actually one piece to the shock. We actually have to get it on the lathe and we have to cut out the inside of the shock so that the bracket falls off. Now in most cases, even if they do look a little bit rusty, this is solid steel, so once you clean them up they're usually fine, but in a rare case like this, these are that old that they're actually starting to pit and rust away, so we're not confident using these old ones. So for this one we're going to make our own brackets ourselves. Now we have a bunch of machinery here dating back to the early 1900s that run constantly making small parts for every shock, but for the main shock body we use Haas CNC machines. And every shock we do here is made out of a metal tube like this. So the CNC machine's job is to cut the shock to the desired length, and it is going to put the internal and external threads on so we can build the shock later. So before we can build up the shock, we're going to have to clean off these brackets which hold the anti-roll bar and the front track rod end on. Now we actually have to grind off the old track rod because it was seized in the bracket, but after a sandblast they come up looking like this. And now we have all of the physical parts ready so we can build up the base of the shock. So we're going to complete the rear shock first, and we have measurements and jigs to make sure that everything is welded in the complete factory OEM place. And once the rears are done, it's time to complete the front shocks as well. Now once the shocks are built up, they need to be protected because steel does rust. Now we have a plating plant in-house, and it's a vigorous chemical process of cleaning the shocks, prepping the shocks, and ultimately coating the shocks in a layer of zinc which does not rust. And you can choose between two different colours, which are gold and black. So since the external shock is now built up, it's time to build up the internals, and it starts with a rod like this, which is machined on our CNC machine. Now I'm not going to get too deep into the mechanics of this because after 3 years of working here, I still don't fully understand exactly how this works. But it's basically a selection of certain springs, pistons and washers, and they control the flow of oil from one tube into another, thus creating the resistance which underpins how a shock absorber actually absorbs shocks. The stiffer this spring is, the harder it is for the oil to flow through it, which means a stiffer shock. And the softer this spring is, the easier it is for the oil to flow through, which means a softer shock. And the final thing to do is make an inner tube. Now the rod actually sits inside this inner tube, and the inner tube divides the two spaces of oil, controlling the flow of one to another. And once the oil is inserted into the tube, the shock is finally sealed and tightened, ready to work like a shock absorber. And all of our shocks are filled with gas. Now this gas pressurizes against the oil and acts against the oil, making sure we have the most responsive shock we can offer. Now every shock here is dyno tested, and the results are printed out and given to the customer so you can physically see how consistently the shocks are working. And the final thing left to do is just build up the rest of the shop, which includes installing the spring and the spring seats. Now you can actually opt for specific spring rates, but if you don't know them, we will choose the best ones that we think with the information that we've received from you and your vehicle. And after the final stickers and branding have been installed on the shop, we're ready to package them up and send them out to the customer, which in this case is Brad with his turbo engine swapped MR2.